Relevant background. Me, 44-year-old male, and my wife, 45-year-old female, have been married for 22 years. We have 5 children, ages 20 years, 18 years, 15 years, 12 years, and 6 years. Up until about a year ago, we were both devout members of the Mormon Church. Last July, I deconstructed Mormonism. My wife and children remained devout members. My 20-year-old son was serving a mission for the Mormon Church when I deconstructed, but returned home last week. I've been processing my deconstruction the past year and felt like I was in a better headspace. But my son coming home from his mission last week triggered some issues I've been trying to work through. Part of working through those issues has been writing my thoughts in a notebook to try to understand my thoughts and emotions. And, for better or worse, my wife and I mostly avoid conversations surrounding Mormonism because she gets offended and I get frustrated. I recognize this is not ideal. Yesterday, my wife and children went to church without me. I'd been attending with them each week, but about a month ago, I decided I couldn't go anymore for my own mental health. My son spoke, gave a sermon last week after returning from his mission, which I attended to support him. But yesterday, I just could not bring myself to go. My wife asked why I didn't want to go. I told her I just couldn't, but we didn't discuss the reasons why. I've become keenly aware of the cognitive bias known as the backfire effect, which has played an outsized role in our relationship since I stepped away from the church. This is not new. We've had this conversation about me not attending church with her and the kids before, and my wife has more or less accepted me not attending without it turning into a bigger issue. When my family left for church, I was making notes in my notebook. My wife, largely due to her religious indoctrination, is not a safe space for me to talk to about my mental health or deconstruction. We've had conversations about me needing a private space to process my thoughts and feelings. For me, that private space is my notebook. She agrees, in principle, that I am entitled to my own private space to process my thoughts and feelings, although she still asks me what I'm writing about whenever she sees me with a notebook and pen. She's very concerned that I'm writing about her, which I guess is valid in this case. My response yesterday was that I was working through my own private feelings. She pressed me harder, asking whether I was writing about her. I told her that it's not constructive for me to share what I'm writing down, as they're not fully formed thoughts, and they're things I'm trying to understand about myself. After she left for church, I finished writing some of my thoughts, closed my notebook, and put it next to my bed on the nightstand. When my wife got home from church, she seemed fine. We talked about what to do for dinner and watched a movie with the kids. At some point, my wife went upstairs. I stayed downstairs and took a nap on the couch. Sometime later, she came downstairs, visibly distraught. She asked me if she and I were okay. I told her we were. She asked if I really loved her and wanted to be married to her. I assured her I did. She's been insecure about our relationship since we got married. My faith transition has exacerbated her insecurity, so I didn't think too much of our exchange. She frets often about our relationship and has asked me these same questions more times than I can count. However, the rest of the night she was detached and crying on and off, but wouldn't tell me why. When we went to bed, she asked me some questions that felt like they were out of left field. For example, "You left the church. Why wouldn't you change your mind on me too? Do you even want to go with us to drop the kids off at college? Are you sure you're okay with the vacation I planned in October? We don't have to go if you don't want to. I've told her repeatedly that I want to go," etc. When she left for work this morning, she was uncharacteristically cold to me. After she left, I realized that the questions she was asking aligned with some of the notes I'd made in my notebook. It's the only thing explaining her behavior and the questions she was asking. By way of explanation, I was attempting to list the things about my spouse's values and personality that made my faith deconstruction difficult. It was not intended to run her down or belittle her, or even to create a laundry list of all her flaws. I make it a point not to bring up character flaws or personal grievances with my wife when we argue, as I appreciate that people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. These were my own private thoughts, trying to understand my own feelings surrounding my marriage and deconstruction, and my attempt to process through them. My wife has lots of wonderful qualities. I love her and want to remain married. However, certain aspects of our relationship dynamic, which has been largely informed by our formerly shared religion, have been, and continue to be, difficult for me to navigate now that I've left the faith. Below are a few of the things I'd written down verbatim that I think were probably the most triggering/problematic for her. Lack of empathy. Cannot understand people with differing perspectives and does not want to try. Hand waves others' trauma, including mine. Controlling. Struggles to allow others to have their autonomy, including me. Keyhole compassion. Autonomy. Has allowed personal values to be subsumed by the organization, views morals in a way that promotes shame. Misaligned priorities. Places needs of institution over everything else. She has not told me she read my journal, likely because it's a boundary I've previously set, and she knows reading my private notes would be a violation of that boundary. We talked on the phone at lunchtime, and when I asked her what sent her into a tailspin, she said she didn't know. She was just concerned about our relationship and left it at that. I'm of two minds about this. One, if she did read my notes, I'm reasonably certain she did. I feel awful she saw my private notes about her. I certainly wouldn't want to read those things about myself, even if they were true. They were devoid of any context and therefore likely seemed harsher than they were intended. I feel like this may have broken something inside of her, and I have no idea if it's repairable. On some level, I wish I wouldn't have written these things down, and I understand how she would be hurt by the things I'd written. However, too, on the other hand, it's incredibly upsetting that she violated a boundary I'd explicitly set. I certainly did not intend to hurt her, but part of me feels like she brought this upon herself, and if she feels bad, it's her own fault. Find out. It's also indicative of one of the issues I'm trying to work through. She struggles with control over the people in her life and has a hard time allowing others their own autonomy to be their own person. Her insistence on knowing every thought that comes into my head is a part of her struggle with my autonomy. Mormonism plays an outsized role in this, which is why it was one of the things I'd written down, as we were both indoctrinated to believe that autonomy shouldn't really exist for husband and wife. We were supposed to become one when we married, and therefore reserving any space for ourselves to be our own person is forbidden. I've been working on giving her grace related to the things I know are the result of 40 years of toxic religious dogma, but her overstepping a boundary like this is incredibly upsetting whether or not it's because of her religious indoctrination. Regardless, I feel like her getting her feelings hurt because of what I wrote is a natural consequence of her inability to respect boundaries and autonomy. So I'm looking for input. Am I in the wrong for writing down my thoughts? Do I ask her if she read my notes, even though I have no evidence she did so, aside from her outsized reaction and weirdly specific questions? Do I ignore it and let her process through it? Is this potentially a good thing that will lead to a better understanding between us? We have 2 kids starting college next week, and so counseling is probably not in the budget, which is the reason why I was trying to process things on my own through my journal for my life. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. This is a lot to unpack, mate. I think you need to have a deep, no-holds-barred conversation about religion and why you left, and then an even deeper conversation about what that means for you, her, and your children. In her mind, she is probably scared that the figurehead of her family, if my understanding of Mormonism is correct, has left the church and now no longer wants to be a part of it, which was a core pillar of her family and her life. If that can change, then maybe divorce could be on the table too. A discussion needs to be held that allows for full honesty and openness on both sides, with no rug sweeping. It sounds like she can be dismissive, and you will have to work on not allowing her to dismiss, and make sure she voices her views as well. Good luck, man. My mom married a Mormon, and we were in the church for a year before getting out, and it was rough being a part of that. Comment 2. From what I understand about Mormonism, which admittedly isn't a lot, I do not see the two of you as compatible anymore, with your wife being devout in her religion, and you having distanced yourself and are deconstructing it. I think the two of you need a frank conversation about where your head is at with the whole thing. That being said, it almost seems like you're treating her like she's a child by not talking to her about it. It's far past time for marriage counseling. Now, for the update. A few weeks have passed since the last post, and things in the house have gotten worse. My wife and I haven't talked about anything other than the kids and the necessary stuff around the house. The space between us is tense, and I feel like I'm always careful about what I say. My wife has been distant. At first, I thought she was just upset about my notes, but now I think it's something else. She often spends her evenings alone in our bedroom. Sometimes I can hear her on the phone, talking quietly. I can't make out the words, but I know she's talking to someone. Family dinner night came around last week. I thought it might lighten the mood a little. Try to get the family back together. I made some jokes, tried to get everyone laughing. My wife just sat there, giving short answers. It was like she was in a different world. Our teenage daughter noticed too. She asked if everything was okay, but my wife just brushed it off, changing the topic to something else. My son, fresh from his mission, started sharing stories about his experiences. My wife didn't engage at all. It was like he was talking to a wall. After dinner, I went to check on her. She was on the phone, speaking quietly. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard some bits. She was talking about feeling lost and needing guidance. The next day, I found a strange text on her phone. It was from an unknown number, saying they supported her feelings. It made me feel uneasy. When I confronted her, she just deflected, saying it was a friend from church. I didn't believe her, but I didn't push it. Tensions rose during a family outing at a local amusement park. I tried to include my wife in conversations, but she spent most of the day on her phone, ignoring me and the kids. It was really frustrating. We returned home, and I found her in the living room, phone still in hand. I asked her to put the phone down and talk, but she snapped back, saying I wouldn't understand. I decided to go for a walk to cool off. I took my notebook with me. When I returned home, the living room was empty, and I found a note from my wife saying she needed space. It was really painful. One evening, my daughter texted me asking if I knew about a secret meeting planned for the following weekend. I was confused, so I questioned her. She reluctantly revealed it was a church gathering for my wife. That hit me hard. I decided to attend the gathering, hoping to find some answers. At the gathering, I saw my wife talking to an old friend who had left the church. I overheard their conversation about freedom and living authentically. It made me uncomfortable. I left quietly, but not before noticing their hug. The next day, I reached out to this old friend to understand what was going on. He told me my wife had been questioning her faith and felt trapped. My frustration built up because it felt like my wife was confiding in someone else. I decided to take action. I set up a surprise family dinner to confront the situation directly. I invited all our children, and the atmosphere was tense. As the dinner progressed, I addressed my wife about her recent behavior in the meeting. She deflected at first, but eventually admitted she felt lost and uncertain about everything. I revealed that I knew about the hug. Instead of breaking down, I stood firm, suggesting we both need to be honest. She went quiet after that. Then I surprised everyone by announcing that I was considering moving out for a while. The shock on my wife's face was clear, and our kids exchanged worried glances. The dinner ended in heavy silence, and I left the table. I sent a final text to my wife, letting her know I wanted to have a serious conversation about our future. I plan to stay with a family member for now. Everything is open-ended, but I feel like we've established some clear boundaries. Edit. My wife and I are still living apart, focusing on ourselves and our kids. I found out the texts on her phone were from a former friend who left the church and isn't a good influence. I've spoken to her about this. She says she needed someone to talk to, but I don't trust this person. The kids have adjusted well, and my daughter is in a stable relationship. I'm trying to be more open with my wife and trust her more. Am I the idiot for tracking my wife's behavior and confronting her about her secretive actions? I have been with my wife for 14 years, married for 5, and we have 2 kids who are 4 and 7 years old. When we met, I told her I am very affectionate and I like to cuddle. She was affectionate as well when we met, but over the years, things have become pretty much intolerable. For the last 3 months, I have been keeping track of her behavior towards me. I stopped giving her kisses about 2 months ago just to see how she reacts, and she didn't notice. A month ago, I stopped giving her hugs and pretty much stopped touching her, excluding small gestures like touching her back or shoulder as I walked past her. She didn't notice. Only when I didn't give her the foot massage that I have given her for the last 14 years, pretty much every evening, did she ask why I am mad at her. For the last 5 years, she hasn't initiated any sort of intimacy, whether that be intimacy, kissing, hugs, or anything. When I kiss her, she says, "What's this about?" which indicates that she has no interest in me kissing her. For the last 4 months, I have been drowning in my thoughts about ruining my life by getting with her and having kids with her. Now I'm stuck. I have talked to her about these things and told her how I feel, but it's pretty much always the same. I am at fault, I am needy, I am this and that. She never acknowledges that she may have some faults as well. I am not perfect, but I pull my weight. I do chores, and I would happily help her more, but she doesn't allow me to. I make things my way, and that's not okay. It's her way or the highway. I make a bit more than she does, and I pay more on a monthly basis. And if the kids need anything, I am the one paying, and I'm fine with it. I try to take care of the kids as much as she lets me, but she never wants to be away from the kids for more than 2 days in a row. There have only been 2 weekends since our second child was born, when she gave me permission to take the kids on a weekend trip to my parents' house. She never wants to be alone with the kids. So once a year, I get to leave the house for a weekend with my buddies. It's basically just us 4 hanging out every day. I'm exhausted, tired, and lost. She complains about things like being tired and gaining weight, but when I try to help her with it, she just declines because I don't know anything. When I point out that her diet is the reason for her problems, she just scoffs and ignores me. I have been tracking my eating and exercise for almost my whole adult life. I'm not super strict about it, but I am in pretty good shape and always have been. I have never cheated, never even touched another woman, and never even had the urge. But for the last few weeks, I have been having vivid dreams about cheating, and when I wake up, I feel so guilty. This became a bit of a rant, but my main point is, what else can I do? I'm just so tired of this. I dream about leaving and never coming back, just disappearing, but I can't leave my kids. If we didn't have kids, I would have left her years ago. Would I be a total jerk if I just started divorce proceedings? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Have you had a conversation about being unhappy with the marriage? Yes, I would consult with a lawyer to prepare in the event of a divorce, but I would have a really hard conversation about the viability of the marriage and if it is worth saving. She seems to use the children as a barrier to the two of you getting time as a couple and time to hang out individually. What's the root of that? I would try marriage counseling first if she is open to it. Comment 2. It feels like she is distancing herself from you, like she doesn't want to work things out with you so you will feel bad and initiate the divorce, allowing her to get away from you without feeling guilty. It's so strange how some people don't want to work the relationship out with their partners. Isn't that the meaning of being married, being together through the ups and downs of life and having each other's backs? Now for the update. A couple of days after my last post, I was at my son's birthday party at the local bowling alley. My son loves to get all his friends together and bowl, eat pizza, and if I'm lucky, not break anything. I'm busy setting up all the decorations and helping the kids with their shoes. It's a lot of work, and I'm starting to realize how much my wife usually does this stuff. She takes charge of the kids' parties, and I'm just here to help. But that day, she seemed really distant and preoccupied. Hardly engaged with the guests, just kind of floating around. The only time I heard her voice was when she was laughing with a couple of her friends while cutting the cake. But the laugh sounded so forced, like she was pretending. I couldn't help but notice that she kept checking her phone. I've never seen her do that before at family events. It was like she was waiting for something urgent. After the party, while I helped clean up, she took the kids home early. I found a birthday card left behind that my wife had received from one of her friends. It had a suspiciously intimate note inside. I confronted her about the card later that night, but she just brushed me off, said it was just a joke. A week later, she became even less affectionate and more secretive. While doing laundry, I found an unfamiliar shirt in the kids' room. Shirt was definitely not mine. I asked her about it, and she claimed it belonged to a family friend who dropped it off. Okay, so now I'm getting curious. I decided to drop by the family friend's house to return the shirt, only to find out they haven't seen it before. They look at me like I'm crazy. One weekend, I reluctantly agreed to let her go out with friends while I stayed home with the kids. After she left, I found the same number repeatedly popping up on her phone. Call log was busy as hell with that number. During dinner one night, I casually mentioned a mutual friend's party coming up, but she seemed uninterested and changed the subject. The next week, I overheard her on a phone call in the other room. She was whispering and giggling, and it just felt off to me. I decided to ask her directly if there's someone else. She just laughed it off and told me I'm imagining things. At a family gathering for Thanksgiving, I noticed how she spent most of the time on her phone, ignoring the kids. I approached her about being present and participating in family activities, but she snapped at me, saying I don't understand her life. After the holidays, I found out she's been planning a trip with her friends, but the destination is vague. During a tense dinner, I asked about her trip, and she got defensive, insisting I'm being controlling. The kids' school has a parent-teacher night, and she suddenly opts out, saying she has other plans. At the meeting, I learned from other parents that they've noticed her absence from events. Feeling uneasy, I decided to check her social media, and I found pictures from a recent outing with friends, but she wasn't tagged in any. I asked her about the outing, and she claimed it was just a last-minute decision and nothing to worry about. A few days later, I found a receipt in her purse from a restaurant I know I wasn't invited to. I finally confronted her about the suspicious behavior, but she accused me of invading her privacy. At a family Christmas gathering, I caught her stepping outside for a call, and the tone sounded flirty. Weeks passed, and I felt the distance grow between us, leading to more arguments about our relationship. I decided to talk to a family member about my concerns, but they just dismissed my worries. Eventually, during a tense discussion, she revealed she's unhappy and suggested we take a break. While trying to digest this, I found out she's already booked a trip for the break without discussing it with me. The trip leads to her being away for an extended period, so I'm left with the kids. When she returns, I confront her again, but this time she's cold and distant. We have a final argument, and in the heat of the moment, she reveals she's been seeing someone else, effectively ending our marriage. We're not even in the same state of mind right now. I just want to focus on co-parenting. Edit: my wife admitted to seeing someone else during a heated argument. We are now focused on co-parenting and moving forward. Am I the idiot for calling the cops on my boyfriend after he screamed at me in front of his kid? My hang-ups are this. 1, we fight. A lot. Probably every other week at best. Every fight devolves into him going into 30 to 40-minute rants. Yes, I've taken note of the time, relentlessly screaming at me trying to drive his point home. Calling myself out here, I find myself rolling my eyes or sighing when I've finally had enough, or trying to resolve the issue as fast as possible so he'll stop. He says fighting is normal and that I'm unreasonable because I think we fight too much. I understand people fight in relationships, but if I'm questioning if this frequency is too much, is that not a sign it's too much? Or do I really just have rose-colored glasses here? Number 2, my biggest hang-up is him and his child, of whom he has 50% custody, not having anywhere to live. When we met, he was living with his parents and was very unhappy. He moved in with me very quickly at the beginning of our relationship. He cannot afford to live on his own, and I'm scared to put him in that situation. 3, the love I have for him feels different than anyone before. We've talked about marriage and picked out rings, but lately I've had the feeling that maybe love just isn't enough. So my question is this: how do you know when to leave? The last time I left a long-term partner, was after I grew to resent him. I don't want to do that to myself or anyone else ever again. Now for an update, everyone. August 31st, 2024. I wrote this last night after an argument started. I've been financially stressed, paying all of my bills, the house bills, and covering his. I haven't been sleeping at night, so I was out on the couch from 1 to 3 a.m. He came out, insisted I tell him what was wrong. I kept saying I didn't want to talk about it and to please leave it for another time. After 5 minutes of repeated asking, I told him I was questioning whether or not to stay in the relationship. He screamed, stormed out, and came back 1.5 hours later. I begged him to not continue once he got back, and after some convincing, he let me go to sleep. I went to work this morning, didn't speak to him, and dreaded coming home. His son was now with us, so as soon as he started in on me again, I begged him not to do this in front of the child. He said he didn't care and continued screaming at me. I finally recorded it, so I know I'm not crazy. I'm as calm as I can be while begging for peace. He's screaming at the top of his lungs. His son is crying. It escalated to the point I called the police. I'm glad I called when I did. It didn't progress past property damage and tears. I called his mom and organized for him to go back to her house. I'm done. Today was the first time I've told anyone in person about our problems. I called my aunt, and she immediately hopped in the car to drive 6 hours to me. My sister now knows I'm going to be okay. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Ponder this. You linked the emotion of love to picking out rings. I've seen multiple miserable couples act almost high during their engagement only to divorce soon after. The behavior of getting rings created a feeling that looked like intoxication, happily ever after, and all that spins people out. Open your eyes. He was miserable and cannot provide for himself or a child. So he not only moves in with you, but starts the ring talk. Have you considered he knows exactly how this will make you feel? He spiked your heart the way a predator spikes a drink. Sober up and get away from this guy. Emotions are not accurate, and the intensity of the fighting is confusing your mind as it imagines it must mean you deeply care for each other. It doesn't. It will get worse. Go slower in the future. Healthy people take their time. You are going to be a mother to his child and free housing to some man who screams at you. Therapy immediately because you deserve so much better. Comment 2. 1. Fighting is normal in relationships. But from what I read, this sounds like a toxic style of fighting. It sounds uncivilized and condescending. Screaming to get a point across defeats any chance of resolution. It makes sense you'd react that way, especially if it's been ongoing. 2. He is a grown man and should be responsible for his life and all that comes with it. You don't need to take care of a grown man. He can and should be self-sufficient in basic life necessities. You both should be partners in life. Be careful not to take on the role of the mother. 3. Love changes and evolves with time. Relationships are like this garden. Both partners must equally tend to consistently. So, if your garden isn't getting the attention it needs, it makes sense feelings evolve. So if these are deal breakers for you, maybe you already know what you want, so listen to yourself. All the best, and wishing you happiness and peace of mind. Now, for the update. It's been 3 weeks since the last big fight with my partner. Things have been so awkward at home. Like, not even the good kind of awkward where you can laugh it off, just uncomfortable silence and avoiding each other. So I thought, maybe I can do something nice and take my partner's 7-year-old son out for ice cream. I figured he could use a little fun, and maybe it would bring some normalcy back into our lives. Also, I felt bad because the kid had been missing out on some family stuff, and I know he loves ice cream. So we went, and he seemed like he was having a good time, all smiles and stuff. We got home, and my partner was waiting for us, pissed off. He went off about how I'm trying to steal his son, and how he's not even allowed to do anything without consulting him first. Like, bro, it's ice cream, not a trip to Disneyland. I told him I just wanted to spend some time with his kid because he's been missing out on stuff and my partner's been so busy with work and looking for a new place. So, yeah, I get why he was upset, but come on. The kid is sad and needs some attention. But no, my partner just started yelling about how I try to control everything and how I'm not his kid's mother and stormed off. I mean, who even talks like that? A couple of days later, my partner called me, asking for help to get his stuff from his mom's house. He said he needed my truck, and honestly, I was just so fed up with all of it that I said fine. So I drove him over, but the whole trip was just silent. Not a word was said. When we got to his mom's house, I noticed his ex-girlfriend's car parked in the driveway. As soon as my partner saw it, he got all defensive, saying she just dropped off some old stuff. I stayed in the car while he went inside, and after about 10 minutes, I started to feel uneasy. So I knocked on the door and walked in, and there was his ex, sitting on the couch, laughing and chatting with him like they were BFFs or something. I confronted him about why she was there, and he just brushed it off like it was nothing. I mean, come on. So I got angry, told him I was not in the mood for his BS, and I needed some space to think. So I left to go to my aunt's house. My aunt welcomed me in and listened as I unloaded everything on her. I even told her about the ex being at his mom's house, and she was like, oh, hell no. So after leaving my aunt's, I decided to take a break from social media. I had been posting everything on there, and I felt like I needed to focus on myself for a bit. So I did that. I spent more time on my hobbies and all that stuff, trying to find some clarity on what I wanted. During that time, I noticed how often my partner was reaching out. It was like he was blowing up my phone, but I kept my distance. I needed to focus on me for a bit. A week passed, and I got a message from him asking if we could meet up. I agreed and figured a local diner would be a neutral setting. So we sat down, and he seemed different. Not all angry and yelling, he was calm and collected. He admitted that he had been stressed about finances and the living situation. I mean, who wouldn't be? It's tough out here. But he didn't want to show it because he thought it would make me think the relationship wasn't worth it. I listened as he talked, but I made it clear that I wasn't okay with how he handled things. The whole ex situation and everything. He promised he would figure things out and show me that he could handle responsibilities. I was skeptical but willing to see where this went. We talked about therapy together, but I said I needed to think about it. It was a lot to take in. Eventually, we agreed to try spending more time with his son and focus on family activities. One weekend, we took his son to a local carnival, and it was a blast. It felt like a fresh start, you know? On the way home, he asked if I would consider moving in together again. He said he would take charge of responsibilities around the house, and I'm like, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. A few days later, I found out he had reached out to a financial advisor for help. I mean, thank God. We ended the month with a family gathering at my aunt's house for a holiday dinner. My partner helped cook and even brought his son along. They got along great, and it made for a pleasant evening. It felt good to be around family and enjoy a nice meal together. Edit. It's been a few months since I've updated. My partner and I have been doing well. He moved into a new apartment and has been handling child support and bills on his own. We have a family night every week with his son. It's been a positive change. I'm in a good place now. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.